I think there is core values and willing to like take big bets. And even when it doesn't make any sense, even when the organization doesn't understand it, like really being, and I always call them the spiritual kind of leader of the company, like spiritually getting the company there, right? Not just goals, not just, process, but like spiritually holding their hands and getting them there. I don't think I've seen that again or since.
Welcome to the Startup CEO Show. I'm your host, Mark MacLeod. I got a special episode for you this week where I sit down with David Cancel. David is a 5-time founder, founded Performable, Lookery, was a key leader at HubSpot, founded Drift, on and on. And he's had nothing but success. I met him many, many years ago, and he was humble then, and he's humble now. He sold his company Performable to HubSpot really early in the HubSpot journey and became a giant shareholder in HubSpot. So we talked about that decision. We talked about what made HubSpot so successful. He then went on to found Drift, which for a time was the fastest growing SaaS company ever and had a giant exit on that to Vista. So we talk about that. And then we switch gears and talk about, some personal topics, like how to keep balance as a CEO. He and I both went through divorce, and we talk about that. It was a really great conversation. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you subscribe. David, welcome to the Startup CEO Show. It's a true pleasure to have you here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm cold, but thank you for having me.
It's a true pleasure. They say good things don't happen to good people, and I met lots of colorful characters in my many decades here in the startup world. And you won't remember this, but I first met you at an event in Cambridge many, many years ago, even before I did FreshBooks and Shopify. And you were already kind of on the radar screen. I just bumped into you in the hallway and we chatted. And I think maybe it started Performable, like you'd definitely done Lookery, but like I was a nobody. And you treated me like I was a somebody, and it really stood out, to be honest. I've seen you a few times along the years, and you've had some crazy success, and I feel like from a values perspective, you're the same person. And so I appreciate that very much.
Means the world to me.
Thanks, man. And so, I don't know, I would really love, there's no one recipe for startup success, because otherwise someone would have written a book and I wouldn't have a coaching business. But I don't know, you've done this 5 times. You seem to be batting 5 for 5. And you're probably best known for, HubSpot and Drift. But I'd love to start with where I first really met you was Performable. And first of all, trying to figure out a thing that we still desperately need, right? Marketing attribution. But, you made a big decision. It was a business that was working. You had backers. You had a track record. You were solving a problem that's still not solved, so you could easily keep going. But you made a decision to sell to HubSpot, and pretty early, where they couldn't afford to pay for you in cash, so they paid for you. I don't know if it was all, and I don't need to know all, but I know you became a major shareholder. So talk us through that decision to sell Performable as a starting point.
Sure. I will say that, Performable was my 3rd company I had started, and I didn't have any plans to sell it, as you said. And so I had raised a Series A from day one from CRV. And we were kind of, we started out with marketing attribution. Kind of our insight was an obvious one today, but it wasn't at that point, which was a long time ago now, which was like, in order for marketing systems to work in the future, you really had to have a unified profile. And so that you could understand that this is Mark, on LinkedIn and on my website and in my email and in my, and unify all those different IDs and him on Facebook and et cetera, into a single profile. And that was kind of a crazy idea, and was kind of blasphemy at the time in marketing, because marketing was all about one-to-many programs. And so they were like, why would you ever need a profile? This isn't the CRM, you don't need it as in the one-on-one sales interactions. But we thought it would be needed, and we thought that over time, your customer Mark would appear on more and more systems, and you needed to tie together in order to have a personalized experience. So we started with attribution, quickly turned into marketing automation. And we were probably like since I will say since starting the company, I had always had this kind of, mostly from the board of HubSpot at the time, these kind of like inbound chats that were just like funny inbound, but that
Yeah.
were yeah,
No pun intended.
yeah, that they were just like, you know what, you guys are doing marketing automation. HubSpot at the time was doing top of the funnel, which means website CMS and some keyword optimization stuff. You guys should come together and build, a pillar company in Boston, because there hadn't been a company that had gone public in Boston for a very long time at that period, right? And so, in the tech space, and so they kept poking me, and I kept saying no. And then, we ultimately decided to do it. We were about 18 months into the business. We had more than half of our money left. We had things were going well on, in all ways that we could measure it. There was really no reason to do it. But, when I had met more, and I knew kind of all the board members of HubSpot and were friends with them pre HubSpot, and had spent time with Dharmesh and Brian, who were the founder, Brian Halligan, Dharmesh Shah. I thought, we were aligned not only kind of in what we wanted to do and kind of the boldness of kind of trying to build this pillar company, but also kind of our values seemed to align. And it felt, that's a hard and squishy thing to always talk about. It kind of felt like, when we cared about the same things, when we talked from a people standpoint and from kind of what we were trying to build. And so I made that decision easier. I will say I had one board member at the time. The outside investor did not want to sell at all. He tried to do some preemptive Series Series B offers with some other VCs that would included money off the table. That would be kind of equivalent to what the HubSpot thing was at the time, because it was a blended deal. And ultimately, I decided to do it, and it was the right thing. In retrospect, it was a great outcome and great experience for us all.
Must have been a huge decision. I get it from CRV's perspective, right? CRV's tier one firm. You had a track record, like we picked our jockey, we've got our bet, let's go. So I can see why they would have had dissonance.
It was a personal reason at the end of the day, which usually people don't talk about this stuff. But I had a co-founder, Elias, who I started many companies with since, and at the time, and I had the great fortune of having sold two companies before, so I was in a different level of comfort than he was, and he was just getting on his feet. He had three kids. He was like he was all or nothing in Performable. And it really came down to me was that for him and some of the other people on the team, but specifically for my co-founder, like this would be a life-changing event if we did it right then. And as soon as I came to grips with that, I was like, done, we're doing it.
So that was really a mass, on the one hand, it's an exit decision, but on the other hand, it's an investment decision. You're making a decision to invest in HubSpot. How far along were they then? Did you have a sense of like, this is going to be a thing, or was it still very speculative?
Definitely not. It was very speculative. I mean, they were about, they were Performable was like a 20-person company. They were like a 200-person company at the time. And they were probably, I think that year we were going to approach, it was sizable, but let's say 25 million, I think, in ARR, something like that. So it was definitely sizable. I think the um, the mystery for us all, even being in the same ecosystem that was Cambridge and Boston, was we never really understood what it was that HubSpot was selling at that point. And because it was a different era, right? It was a time when products could be sold, on a demo, through an assessment. You weren't really, in some cases, you didn't even demo software back then. So you'd be sold on a promise. These things that don't exist now, right? The free trial motion was not a thing. So from the reason I bring that up, from the outside, it was kind of opaque. You couldn't see what was it exactly that these people were buying. And so we didn't know until we got there, really until the deal was done and we were there, and I started to see what this was. And then I was like, oh shit, we have a lot of work to do. And again, because it was just a CMS at the time and kind of a website grader, and wave that they were riding was that all small businesses wanted to get on Google. They didn't really, but most of these people who were early customers didn't know what that meant. They didn't know what a website was. They didn't know the difference between website and Google. They just said, I need to get on Google. All right. And that's what was sold to them. So then we had to rebuild it. I had to rebuild the team. I had to rebuild every piece of software that existed. I had to get us into marketing automation. I had to get us into sales and build a CRM. I had to do all these things, which we did in a pretty short time. In about 4 years, we did that. And then we went public during that phase. All now kind of seems impossible. I don't really know. It seems if someone were to tell me the story, and I'm not going really into detail of all the things we had to do, then you'd be like, this is nonsense. They didn't do that. This is like a make-believe story.
So huge decision for you, but sounds like a huge game-changing decision for them as well.
Yeah, a big bet. And I'd say, I credit the board and especially Brian and Dharmesh to have faith. And because I don't know if I would have had faith in myself when I was like coming to them and saying, I'm going to fire the entire engineering team. I'm firing the entire product team. We are going to rewrite every single piece of thing in this place while trying to go from, 25 million to 100 million plus and going public. We're going to do that all at the same time, and we're not stopping. Right. And I don't know. I don't know if I would have believed that, but they had faith.
Like changing a plane engine mid-flight.
Mid-flight. Oh my God. And so, they didn't know they were trusting me. And a lot of it was because I had known the board for so long and had worked with them and, from a product standpoint. But, the people that were there that ultimately I replaced, they knew those people. They didn't know me. And so they had to take this bet, and they did. So much credit to them.
I'm curious. All right. So they were 200 people, you were 20, but you come in, you're running product and engineering. That's a giant part of the business. You're a large shareholder of the business. I'm curious, was there a performable culture and a HubSpot culture and they were running simultaneously, or did you integrate and become HubSpot, or did you integrate and become like a new thing?
I love that question. I'd say we became a new thing, and again, that was really Brian, who was the CEO, Brian Halligan, really wanted to shift the culture of the company from being and this is kind of his thesis was from being a sales-driven organization to being a product-driven organization. That was and meant, a lot of internal pushback, a lot of holding, your nose while doing it. It's one thing to say you know, to kind of think about this from a theoretical standpoint, but you've been in a million businesses, like the companies who've been able to transform themselves, it doesn't exist, right? It's like, these are like beyond unicorns. I don't know what you would call them, but decacorns, the Netflix story of going from like shipping CDs to becoming an online only streaming business, that's actually impossible. And it's not impossible because of technology. It's impossible because of all the human resistance and all the, kind of the organization has created a culture around something and has incentives aligned around, one set of goals, which might be the old goals. So it's impossible, but we lived through it. And so we became one company, and that was important to me. And I didn't let the Performable team, which are mostly engineers and product people, even work within the same team. I broke them up, and they became the leaders of the new teams that were coming in and built new teams. And I forced them to split.
Yeah, I love it. That's genius. So HubSpot is obviously still very much a work in progress, but you left some time ago. I'm curious, what is your post-mortem? They're worth $36 billion today. They've created an entire category. It's certain you talked about massive scope on the roadmap, but what else beyond kind of building all of this disruptive technology is behind their success?
I wish I knew. I'd say because I wish anyone knew, because then we could bottle it and reproduce it. I think there's so many different things that go into it. I mean, I think there was timing, definitely important. I think there is core values and willing to take big bets, which Darnesh has been has done repeatedly, and so, and even when it doesn't make any sense, even when the organization doesn't understand it, like really being, and I always call them the spiritual kind of leader of the company, like spiritually getting the company there, right? Not just goals, not just, process, but like spiritually holding their hands and getting them there. I don't think I've seen that again or since.
I'm curious, random question. Have you ever been able to buy Dharmesh dinner?
No, it's impossible. No, actually, no one on this earth has ever been able to buy him.
I thought maybe you could just sneak in a credit card and
No, it's his one. He does not splurge on many things, and his one splurge is hosting these dinners, which and taking people out to dinner, and it's impossible to pay.
another one of the good guys.
Great guy, great guy.
So sounds like you were having some fun. You're kicking ass, creating tons of value. Talk us through the decision to leave to start Drift.
Well, at the time, I'll back up and say HubSpot was the only company where I had sold my company to, and then I had gone as part of it. And before going to HubSpot, like I hadn't sold companies. I had never, the minute it was sold, there was no way I was going to join the acquiring company, like ever. And so, part of that is my fear of being trapped, which, is probably a common theme of a lot of entrepreneurs I know. And so like, feeling like that I've locked myself into something. And so at HubSpot, another amazing thing about HubSpot, I'd say, was something that Brian did, which was like, Brian really managed all the different functional areas in a different way, right? He was not, I would never consider him like my manager. He never treated me like, we almost like ran our own P&Ls, we ran our own organizations, we had, and a lot of the times we'd have, I would see Brian once a month, at a team meeting, because where we would have all of us together. It was a brutal team meeting, it was like a, 12-hour team meeting with, all the leaders. But a lot of months, I just ran my organization and there was no management there, like daily manager.
Did he give you that rope because you were a multi-time CEO, or that's just how he led his people, and so everyone got that rope?
I think I got more rope than most. I think probably because of that, and also truthfully, probably because product was the most alien thing to him, and he had been risen up from a sales driven. He rose up in sales, and so like I'd say, he was pretty hands on in the sales organization, and then I was kind of like didn't know what to make of, didn't know how to evaluate, and so he trusted me a lot, and so yeah, that's the way we ran, and I never felt like to answer your question, I never felt like I worked for anyone, which probably helped me stay there as long as I did. I also stayed there as long as I did, which in retrospect is brief, but for me it was a long time, because the minute I came in and kind of redid and got rid of the existing organization, started to rebuild everything, I had, my mind broke it. And so now I had to fix it. There was no walking away from it. And so the time that I left when we went public, I had reached a point where we had rebuilt all of that. We had built the CRM, we had built all this stuff. And I felt like there was a lot more building to go, but like, I had gotten there. Like I felt like there was a mission that was accomplished. Like, I did what I said I was going to do. And so, I did not want the life of being a public company kind of executive and that kind of thing.
How did that affect you? And sorry to interrupt, but how did that
Yeah.
affect you in product and engineering? I can see how it would affect a sales leader. You have to hit quarterly guidance. I obviously see how it would affect a CFO, but how does it affect you?
I was a very large shareholder of the company, so in that way it would affect me. When we were going public, there was kind of these conversations with the bankers of like, well, you can't leave. They said the one thing that you can't say to my personality. Well, like now you need to commit for n number of time, and you can't just like leave. And it's like, what? I can't leave.
Give you a box with this really nice pair of golden handcuffs. Here you go.
Yeah. The minute they told me I couldn't leave, then I was like, I must leave immediately. Like immediately. It was totally irrational, but that's the truth. It was like, oh, what? I can't leave. Okay. And so, I didn't want that scrutiny. I felt like I had all these leaders in place. Many of those leaders still are leaders there. They're executives there. My team is largely still there, and many years later. And so I felt like I could move on. I did not have any intent of starting another company after I left. I was like, there's no more companies. That's it. And it was only Elias, again, my co-founder in Performable, was that shortly after I left, he left, and I was like, don't leave, you should stay. But he was like, no, I'm going to leave if you're going to leave. And so he left shortly after. And then he wanted to start another company, because for him, he had done Performable, but, like he wanted to do it again. And he was earlier in his career. And so he kind of broke me down after a while to start another company. But then, I was like, I only started another company under all of these conditions. And then all those conditions were met. And so we decided to start another company. One of those conditions was like, we'd have to have a chance at defining a new category. That'd have to be something much bigger than just building a new piece of software. And so we really kind of like honed in on the idea, which is like now everywhere with agents and conversational interfaces around this kind of conversational idea, right? Of like that the future was going to be that you were going to like speak like we do with ChatGPT or many other systems now in a natural way, and not that you were going to fill out forms and do all the stuff that we had been doing in the past. And so we thought this kind of conversational approach was going to be the future. And we're seeing it right now. And so that's why we started and working on the next company, which was Drift.
I feel like you told me this stat once when I was in your office, that Drift was like the fastest growing SaaS company ever. Is that true, or am I dreaming?
Yeah, at that time, I'm sure there's been many after that, but up to that point, yes. And so, one odd thing that happened was like we saw this. Remember those Mary Meeker slides that she used to do, the state of the internet every year? I missed them. So Mary Meeker was this analyst who then later joined Kleiner Perkins, and she would do these state of the internet things every year presentations. And I was looking at one of those. I would religiously follow them and look at them. And one chart that stood out to me, this was kind of at the beginning of thinking about starting a new company, was the growth in messaging systems, right? And so meaning like WhatsApp and like, Line and, Slack was starting at the time. And just like, and so she had this chart, which was like the IRC and all these things, the beginning, instant messenger, beginning of the, whatever you define as the beginning of the internet, to like what the year at that point, which was 2014, and this kind of like slow growth that then just turned into this insane hockey stick. And basically what we're looking at was global penetration of these systems. And so my observation looking at that, and that was the spark for starting Drift, was like, well, if you were like me and been on the internet forever, and you're second probably on being on the internet forever, we had used things like IRC, Instant Messenger, all these kind of things. But the reality is, that was, from a population standpoint, that was a very small subset of us, nerdy people on the internet. Like average people didn't use those. But what had happened was, because of the iPhone largely and those systems, like it had become normalized. And so people were used to talking to people, bots, whatever, just like having conversations, and thought it was normal, where, 10 years before was like weird and geeky and like, what is this thing? And so that was the thing that we're like, oh, this is going to be normal now. And got me excited about starting a new company. It was really, Mary Meeker's observation there.
Nice. So perfect timing, sounds like it. All the elements kind of came together. And right, so HubSpot, you helped transition from sales led to product led. The one time I was in the Drift office, it seemed like a really strong sales culture. There was like banging the gong, so much energy. Sales felt like the center of gravity in the company. Was Drift a mix of sales led and product led, or like what?
100%. I'd still argue we were product led from the, that was the DNA of myself and Elias, and so we were product led. So what happened was, well, two things. One, we started out as a product led motion, freemium approach, the whole thing, right? Free trial. And we were running the business that way. But one thing that I had learned at HubSpot, at Performable before HubSpot, was that I did this experiment where I wanted to do, we were also building A/B testing software at the time. So we were really thinking about A/B testing. Hey, this is how we're doing touchless, using a touchless approach. What about if we hire like one, at that time, one salesperson? Her name was Heidi. We found Heidi and we said, and we see what she performs like, right? But would have to be like a special compared to the touchless funnel, basically on every metric. But you'd have to be a special kind of salesperson because we didn't have anything to give them. We had no plan. We had no training, no collateral, no demo accounts, no nothing, right? And so really have to be an entrepreneurial type of salesperson. And so we brought in Heidi, and we were all engineers, and we sat her right in the middle of all the engineers and myself.
She's a brave soul.
Brave soul, but what it was remarkable because we could all of a sudden we were hearing every single call that she was making because this was still calls, right? And it'd be like, she said XYZ, hang up. She now said XYZ plus, Y. Oh, they started talking to her. So we were learning not only from the product, but also from a marketing standpoint, like the hooks that were working, like what people were interested, how she was keeping people on the line. And so like it became this thing, this kind of like, because I try to design all my teams and companies around building a learning machine, really. So like we are learning machines. So we have to like learn and observe, right? Because when you start a company, and this is where I tell entrepreneurs now, like you start a company, you have, a very short amount of time that you have to learn things, right? And that's predicated on money because that's the number one killer of startups is that, or any type of business is running out of money. And so what you want to do is, and the advantage we have now starting at the time that we do is that unlike before where you had to ship, physical software or you had to sell products face to face, like you can learn and connect with all your prospective customers in real time. And so build a methodology around that and design your company around this idea of like, how do I go from not having one learning loop, one complete learning loop. Let's say we want to test a product or test an idea or concept and then go through a whole iteration like once a month. How do we have thousands of those in a year? How do we build the whole organization from sales, marketing, product that we are learning? We're going through 1,000 learning loops in a year, right? Because that will hopefully, and if are actually studying and learning from each one of those cycles, we're improving. Hopefully, it improves our odds of success, right? And so we learned this. We had this observation of Performable when I started Drift. One thing, people who if you started more than one thing that happens all the time is you have to relearn lessons, right? You feel like you've learned a lesson, and then you're like, wait, why am I not? I forgot that lesson. So at Drift, it was we started the company. We were on our way. We had this touchless motion, and at some point, I'm like, wait, I didn't learn the lesson from Performable. Why don't I hire one salesperson, two salespeople, and kind of A/B test this thing? Why am I doing this again? And so we started to do that. And then an amazing thing happened, which was because of the nature of the Drift product, I'm sorry, the sales reps were using the product that they were trying to sell. The way that they communicated with the prospective customer about what they were trying to sell was using the tool. So it was like, so what that created was there was no need to teach them how to demo the program. There was no training, right, necessary. And their pitch was this, hey, look at how I do this. So another sales professional. And so because of that, we hired one, two, three salespeople. We were seeing them get up to full productivity like immediately. And I am kind of conservative in spending a nickel, every nickel, which anyone will tell you that's worked with me. And so even though three people were like fully productive and they were just selling nonstop, I was like very shy about like, oh, so we add a fourth, this fourth going to break. And then I would add a fourth. And then my board at the time, which were all venture investors, were like, it's go time. start hiring. And, we've all heard that before. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know. And I'm going to go slow. And it was really, I credit Pat Grady, who's an amazing investor at Sequoia, who I've worked with multiple times at HubSpot and then Drift, um, who instead of pushing me saying, sell, he's like, come out to the Bay Area and I just want you to meet some people. And it was just like a learning tour. And so I met, the first head of sales for Salesforce. I met, um, the gentleman who was running ServiceNow at the time. I met a whole bunch of gentlemen who was running Coupa at the time. All these who were, kind of like legendary figures to me, met them all. And basically he had me just meet them and they didn't know why they were meeting me in the first place. And then I would explain, here's what we're doing at Drift, whatever. And then at some point they would ask me, all right, what are the sales metrics? And then I would tell them and they'd be like, what? How fast did they get onboarded? How fast did they hit full ramp? 10 days, and it's like,
What? 10 days? That's insane.
insane, dude. No lie. And so they were fully productive, fully quota attaining within the month. Start month.
Mental.
They were like, what? And at some point they're like, they wanted to like, they were verbally smacking me. I'm just like, wake up. It's time to go. It's go time. You must go. Like, and so then we started to really ramp up the sales hiring and it was great. It was the right decision. But, I would say like as a product founder, I was like, even though I had gone through this many times, like I was dragged kind of into it.
That's fast. I literally never heard of a ramp like that ever.
Me neither. Yeah. I didn't really know and because I'm not I'm not a sales guy. I've been among a million sales leaders. Like I didn't really know what I was looking at. Right. And so it was being around these people who were like true sales leaders and many, many, many times, had done this and scaled that they were like, what? And so they would go through everything. They were like, you have to go now. Playtime's over.
Are you still taking your own meeting notes? Let me tell you about an AI tool that I'm using to take meeting notes for me. It's called Fellow. It's an AI meeting assistant. It takes human-level AI notes, it tracks my action items and decisions, and keeps everything in one place. Built with security and privacy at its core, Fellow is the only AI meeting assistant that leaders trust to capture meeting notes and recordings while keeping your data safe. Thousands of organizations are consolidating tools and relying on Fellow to capture their meetings. The team at Fellow is so confident that you'll love it, they're offering an insane deal to startup CEO listeners. 90 days of unlimited AI-powered note-taking and recording completely free. Visit fellow.app/CEO to sign up today and experience the AI meeting assistant trusted by leaders everywhere. I'm curious, just maybe for any early stage listeners, that first decision to hire Heidi way back, were you pre-product market fit then, and part of her mandate was to help accelerate product market fit, or you already had it?
I'll say we were struggling to find if we had product market fit. In some ways, if you squinted that way, it looked like we had product market fit, and we were lucky that we were starting that company Performable at the time that we were the whole like lean startup or even the name product market fit, that the concept was startup. And so we had got to spend a lot of time with like Eric Ries and all this stuff before the book, before any of this kind of stuff. And so we were trying to define this. And luckily we met a guy when we were raising a round through CRV, they wanted us to meet someone to validate the idea. And his name is Sean Ellis, who's like a legendary growth marketer. But he didn't have a name at this point. Only people in the Valley knew him as this secret thing. And so we met Sean. And then Sean, by the end of the call, was like, I want to be involved with the company. Like, this is it. And in some ways, the early versions, and for those who don't know, Sean really created a concept of like, how do you measure and define product market fit, right? And so in some ways, the product that we built at Performable was the product that Sean had always wanted for himself. And at the time, Sean was doing work for Dropbox and Zobni and all these kind of like legendary companies and like figuring out message testing and figuring out how to hit product market fit. So I'd say using his definition, we definitely had product market fit, but we also had kind of thoughts about expanding the product. And so this is where product market fit kind of thing gets nebulous, because like you want to expand the market, or you want to expand the product, or you want to expand both. Then when do you lose product market fit again, right? We had it for a little niche kind of customer. And so Heidi was helping us explore how much headroom there was kind of in what we were doing. How far up could we go in terms of selling? How wide could we go on a platform? And so she really helped us through all that. We had product market fit on the core kind of offering.
Maybe last question on Drift, and then we'll move on. It struck me from the outside that you had the scale and growth to be a great IPO candidate. You had a CFO in the form of Jim who could have credibly led that. Hearing a little bit about your experience, hey, or your reservations about HubSpot being public, maybe I understand why you didn't take it public, but instead you chose to sell to Vista, which from my standpoint is like the most successful software investor on the planet. Maybe just walk us through that decision.
Yeah. And so, when we started Drift, one of those core things that I hinted at before was this idea that we wanted to build a company that was capable of being a standalone company and could go public someday if we wanted to, but just had that optionality. And so the kind of mission had to be that big. And so at the time that we decided to sell, like we were not looking to sell the company. Again, the board definitely did not want to sell the company. Definitely. But we had raised 3 rounds, one from CRV, one from General Catalyst, and one from Sequoia. And none of them wanted to entertain an offer of selling the company. But what happened was we had it was a different time. And so like this was 21. And so
Good time to be selling.
yeah. Oh my God. So 21. So like early in the year, we had all these inbound offers of like, let's raise a growth round. It was like everyone was doing a growth round at that point. And so we had you know, all the names of all of those kind of funds like coming, like, let's do a growth round, let's do this, let's do that. And I had many friends like you did that were doing rounds at like $2 billion, $3 billion, $4 billion, $5 billion, $6 billion, like and I was like, having been around this so long, and talking, when they would ask my advice, I'm like, I don't know if I would do it. Like, how are you going to get out of a $4 billion valuation? You personally, you as the founder, or you as the team, how would you make money in this? Like, do you know what you have to sell for at this point? And like how many, like, it seems impossible, or it seems highly unlikely. Oh, but everyone was kind of buying into that. And so we had inbound offers that were, had high multi-billion dollar valuations. And so I was considering it, and the board was like really into that idea. And I was like, what? This sounds crazy. It seems too crazy. I was getting nervous, and like, this is too out of control right now from a market standpoint. And again, you can never time these things. I could have been dead wrong, but and had been many times before. But like, it just felt too crazy. And at that point, a friend that this kind of indirect thing, where a friend who had sold his company Vista, and we had inbounds from different PE firms, and I said no to 100%. I wouldn't even reply to, I wouldn't, no, email. That's it. It's nothing. No conversation, nothing. But a friend who had taken his company public and then got acquired by Vista had spoken to Elias casually and was like, he had had a good experience, and he was like, you guys should talk to them. And Elias came back. He's like, hey, what about this? I was like, no way. No way. No, I'm not interested. And so we killed that. It turns out that Elias ran into that person at Vista socially at something like that, and they had a long conversation. He came back again. He's like, I think we should have a serious conversation with them. Like, they're trying to do something different. And there was different thing happening in the market at the time. Private equity, the standard model of buying something for almost nothing, leveraging full of debt, and kind of selling it was kind of, we'll say, was like not the thing that was happening at the time. A lot of the private equity funds were feeling a lot of pressure from a lot of these new growth investors, whether it was Tiger or, Coatue or whatever, like coming into their market and like disrupting and taking stuff. So they were thinking about like, how did they become a growth investor? And so how did they raise even bigger rounds? And so when they approached us, it was at a time, again, it's not like this anymore. It was this brief window where like they were acting more like a growth investor. They were doing all cash deals. They were doing no debt on business. It was like craziness. Um, and so they approached us and they had, an idea for what we could become. And I didn't realize that they had been doing a lot of work on our business for a long time, doing the standard thing of like interviewing our customers and blah, blah, and doing all that stuff without us knowing that had built they already had a case, an internal case for like what the deal would look like before any conversation with anyone in the company. And we got along with them and we thought, okay, it's worth doing. And, I went back to the board, brought up the idea and they were like, hell no, no way, no way. Why would we do this thing? It's like, a billion and whatever. And like, we could do like a 2, 3, 4, 5, like we have these other offers, like this is dumb. And, I really was my relationship with my investor at CRV and the whole CRV team, Izar, who were the first dollar in the company, that I was like, just had the heart to heart with him. I was like, we have to do this deal. And at the end of the day, he said, I'll hold my nose and like, do whatever you want to do, but I'm not in favor. He convinced the rest of the board. We did the deal and then that closed in like November 21 within like a month.
Oof, good timing. Yeah, yeah.
It was the best time in my life. January of 2022, it was over, right? Like we couldn't have done that deal for half of, you know, of what we did. Maybe a quarter. It was like insane. The world like flipped upside down. And so lucky. And it was great because, I structured that deal to make sure that every employee, every past employee, everyone made money on that deal, 100%. So like that was important to us.
Back when I was a banker, I dealt with Vista a bunch, and every time I spoke with someone, I asked them if they would send me a copy of the Bible,
Oh yeah.
and they all just laughed at me like, "Are you crazy?" So I'm curious, did you ever get a copy of the Bible?
I saw copies of different Bibles. I would say at first they would laugh and say, there is no Bible. That's just like a rumor. That's just like,
No, no, it
doesn't exist.
exists.
There it exists. They have a, one of my worries going into it was like that they would be too playbook driven and that they had a playbook and they were just going to run this playbook. And I didn't have that experience. And kind of another thing that gave me comfort with working with Vista was that, I spent a long time talking to past and present CEOs of Vista companies, ones with were bad, good, whatever, and like, and really got, comfort around doing the deal. And one of the first questions I was asking was about this playbook. What is the playbook? What are they going to drill me on? What are they going to make me do? Like, and I'd say the playbook was more like, I'd say their model was more, their mode was more of like letting us figure it out, do our things. We had metrics that we needed to hit. And as long as we were hitting those things, they didn't care about any model. The model was more of like, if nothing is working and like, you're struggling, like, okay, we have like this kind of like Bible of things that we can do. Like, let's just go through the checklist, almost like a, pilot, checklist of things. Yeah, of things we need to try and fix. So it was never pushed down our throat. I saw parts of it at time, and so it was interesting. There was a lot of really smart people there, super hardworking. I thought,
Super hardworking, yeah.
oh my God, I thought we worked hard in starting companies. I was like, my God, I am freaking. They're running laps around us, and how hard these people were working. Crazy.
Maybe that's a great segue to maybe a few personal topics. And so on your LinkedIn bio, you describe yourself as having a quote, balanced approach to business and life. And I'm wondering, is that a now statement or was that a always statement, even when you were kind of operating and grinding?
I will say it depends on you. I had my own definition of balance. So one of the things, so I would say it's been an always approach. And I'd say one of my philosophy from very early on was like that all things have to become in balance, right? That's the natural law of the universe. but I think I thought that people were getting too lost on the definition of balance, right? And so my version of balance is like, is just this pattern, which is a wave pattern. Things will ebb, things will flow, right? Like sun will come up, sun will go down. The tide will come in, tide will go out. And meaning when you're at the height or the bottom of those things, you will be out of balance. One to mention, but over time, nature will make sure that these things become balanced. And so that's how I've always tried to live my life, meaning like there are periods that you're wildly out of balance from, focus on professional endeavors. There are other times that you're wildly out of balance with personal or spiritual things, like, and you're letting other things fall. But, not as long as you can keep coming in and out of those things and over the long run, be in balance for you. That's what matters, right? Never losing sight that you have to go back the other way at some point. And most people that were, especially people that were back in the day blogging about this and talking about this on podcasts and focus on work-life balance and stuff, including some of our people on our team were like so myopic on like every day has to be perfectly balanced. I have to get 15 minutes for this and 20 minutes of meditation. And, especially when everyone was kind of like life hacking and like work exactly this many hours and only commute these were the most miserable people that I would
Of
meet.
course, you're not in flow.
Not in flow. Like this is not a natural state. Nothing in nature acts this way. Like everything is going to be exactly the same. And they thought that definition was balance. And if you mess with any of those things, then they were wildly out of balance and they were having a meltdown. And so I see that less now, but I'd say, we were all kind of in society caught up with this life hacking and trying to cram as many things in one day. And I just always thought that was like not a natural state. That'll never work.
It will come to no surprises to you that most of my CEOs are male. We're in a kind of a male-driven startup world. And I'm going to completely generalize here, that they give everything to work. Out of the 0% that's left, they find something for their kids, partly out of obligation. And then they have literally nothing left for their spouse. And no boundaries. Work just sort of happens to them. This is often like the state when they come in and finally like, okay, fuck it, I need a coach. And anyway, you and I went through divorce at a similar time. And I don't know how much you're willing to share, but I would just be curious, does any of that resonate as contributing, to divorce? Like overall divorce rate is around 50%. I'm sure if I segmented it for entrepreneurs, it's way higher. Like, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, for entrepreneurs and for kind of like card charging, whatever you define it, executives, it's very high. Um, I'm trying to see if my out of balance. No, I'd say my coming in and out of the intense kind of focus on work that I've had over many years. Although I will say I've always ebbed and flowed. And so like had no guilt about doing other things and like dropping lots of work. And I've always been naturally a master of boundaries, of like hard boundaries. Some would say too hard boundaries, but like very hard boundaries. And so um, I'd say no, that intense focus on starting companies and spending all that time on there probably prolonged my marriage.
Tell me more about that, if you don't mind.
I had a great, partner, and but we always had this mode, and you only learn this kind of like in hindsight, and you can kind of start to see it, but it was so obvious, when you look back, um, where she did certain things and I did certain things, and we almost ran in parallel, kind of with a shared mission, but like in parallel, right? Very very little overlap on that stuff. And so because I had intense focus here and she had intense focus on other areas, I'd say probably that led to a place where probably prolonged things because we weren't like butting heads, and in those points where you intersect, like where you're forced to intersect. And so I'd say in some ways she was a great executive and I was an okay executive. And so like it kind of prolonged things. I think, for me, divorce were really the crystallizing point for me was really around I had two kids, and my oldest kid reaching a point where I thought they were, kids can always observe and they know much more than we think and see all the cracks, right? And so, but she had, she was getting to an age where I felt like she could clearly see it. And she being female, I thought like I didn't want this model of a marriage to be her model, to be her normal, right? And so because one thing that you learn over time is that whatever whatever your upbringing and that upbringing experience for you is, that is your normal, right? That's your perspective, right? And it's a very different perspective than someone who's gone through a totally different upbringing. And so, and we only get one. You get one, right? And so, like, what I was defining to her by my actions and our actions in this marriage was going to become her one reference point for what a relationship looks like. And I did not want that to happen. And I didn't know by getting divorced if I was going to make things a lot worse or maybe make things better. I didn't know. But all I knew was like, I didn't want it to be, this is your reference point. I wanted more of a loving environment. I wanted more of that to be shown to her.
And I firmly believe that everything in life happens for us, not to us, even though it may not feel that way in the moment. And I can tell you from personal experience that my divorce happened for me. It was an opportunity to completely reinvent my life. I wouldn't be a coach if I hadn't gone through that. I'm curious, if you look in the rearview mirror, do you feel the same way that this happened for you?
I've never thought about it that way. Yeah, definitely. I think, I think as much as we think that we're self-directed, like things happen, that we cannot explain and we're forced to learn lessons. I deeply believe that. I've always said like, the universe is the teacher of last resort. And so like
Oh,
ideally,
wow.
yeah,
Wow. That's a good one.
ideally you are given all these chances to learn whatever it is you need to learn kind of the easy way, which is to learn through other people's experiences or learning through minor failures of your own. Like, but ultimately, like if you don't learn them, like you will be forced to learn them the hard way, right? And so uh, that says that that there is this greater kind of order or balance to things. So you will learn these lessons, and so um, yeah, I think it happened for me. I don't know how much it was the universe forcing it to happen. Was it the last resort or did I escape? It could have been a lot more painful if I waited.
We could have done an episode just on HubSpot, an episode on Drift, maybe an episode trying to create a CEO playbook as if that could exist, and then an episode just on the personal. So I'm not doing any of these topics full justice, but maybe let's just last question, because I really love for CEOs to lean into their passions and create some real estate for them. And it seems to me you have a real passion for art and you've got a beautiful painting behind you. And so, yeah, just tell me about that. When did that happen? How did that happen?
I'd say, well, when I grew up in it happened in that I grew up in New York City in a very different time. I was born in the Bronx, grew up in Queens, but spent most of my since I was 11, we would sneak away and go down to like Soho and go down to the Village and all these things, when our parents didn't know. And so like, there was no cell phones at the time, no way to track you. And as long as you were home by dinner, like no one knew where you were. And so we were as little kids, my version of Stand By Me was that we were get on a subway and go down to like Times Square and like go down to all these crazy places. Very dangerous, at the time. But we would hang out a lot down and we were really interested as little kids in graffiti and we were all like, wannabe graffiti artists, writers. And so we would spend a lot of time back then as kids in this place in Soho, which at the time was Keith Haring, who's many people know as an artist, started as a street artist, but he had this thing called a pop shop. And it was in this old location right in Soho. And it was like, it was his space and it was part like artist studio, part like store where you could buy like stickers or like, Keith Haring stuff. And like, so there were all these like creative people that were always hanging out there and graffiti writers and stuff like that. And so we would hang out there. And so like that was like amazing. And so like I saw art through street art, right? Which now has become more popularized, Banksy and all these kind of street artists. But at the time, all that kind of stuff was happening in New York back then, including some of his stuff later on. But so I was interested in art because of that. And my brother he went to Parsons, he became a graphic designer. I was always interested, I was always,
Very cool.
yeah, interested in kind of art. And then I left New York, I moved to Boston, and beyond visiting museums, I really didn't spend much time on it. And it was really when I um, moved back to New York City that I really dove head deep into things. Because for me, probably true of a lot of your listeners, like I have to have endless rabbit holes, right? And so to be interested in, so like I can only be interested in things where like there's no end, right? Because if I can become somewhat proficient in it too quickly, then I'm not, I lose interest. And so like art was this thing that there is no end, there is no like you can never learn enough of. And so I started spending a lot of time in going to galleries and things like that, and met people randomly. I always describe my life as like Forrest Gump. I just like stumbled into like different groups of people. And one of them, I didn't know who he was, but he was the longtime director. He's now retired, of the Whitney Museum. He asked me at some point indirectly to join the board, and I did join the board. And that's been like one of the most fun things I've ever done.
Well, David, this has been fascinating. Really great to see your face again. So happy for all your success. I gotta say, when you left HubSpot, I was like, oh, but he's gonna go and be a GP at some tier 1 VC firm.
No, I've never gone over to the other side.
And then you came back for Drift. And so I won't ask you to tell folks what you're going to do. And maybe you're going to do nothing because you don't have to. But it's been a true pleasure to see you, albeit remotely again.
Well, let me know if you're ever in New York, but only when it's warm.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we'll hang out.
All right, my man. Thank you. Take care.
Take care, Mark. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Startup CEO Show. If you'd like to connect with me, be sure to visit my website at markmacleod.me or follow me on LinkedIn at @the_Mark_MacLeod or Twitter at @markmacleod_. And if you want to tune in again next week, be sure to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next time.